All right, everyone, welcome in. For those that have joined us earlier, you would have heard us mapping out our plan for this conversation and how we want it to flow. So maybe you know what's coming, but my name's Angela Koning. I'm a leadership coach and trainer. And we also have Jennifer Forster here. Jen, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
I do. Hello, everybody. I can see some beautiful familiar faces in the chat room, welcoming you all. I'm a mentor for women in the space of self-leadership. So similar to Ange, but on a more personal level. So working at that foundation personal space.
So I think both Jen and I sort of work at the intersection of leadership and personal development, and Jen's got a bit more spiritual development than I normally would. But we firstly just want to welcome you into this call and say thank you really for the courageous act of reaching out to talk about or be part of, listen to this conversation that Jen and I are going to have around burnout with and for you. Your ability to contribute to this conversation is through the chat. So we'd love to see your comments coming through and questions. And as you may have heard, we're allowing time at the end at around 11:45 to answer those. So we've got 15 minutes to address them. So I guess I want to kick off with a short conversation around how this burnout series, or breaking down burnout, came up, and the orientation we have around the corporate and the mystic. So I am a little bit more corporate in my orientation. I work with middle and senior leaders who are quite often feeling burned out in their roles, and I have actually experienced burnout myself. Okay. And so Jen and I are friends. We go hiking, we climb the occasional mountain like we did yesterday, and we're both feeling like we climbed a mountain yesterday. And we just started talking about our burnout experience, and they were long, deep, useful conversations. And we thought, geez, there's so much ground to cover here and so much to be normalized, put on the table and allowed to emerge through discussion around burnout, that we thought we should, it had already been suggested that the corporate and the mystic is sort of what it looks like when Jen and I hang out together. But let's put that on the table and open up this conversation. And we sat down and mapped out this discussion series for you guys. So 4 1-hour webinars like this around burnout. Jen, why do you want to add something around why this is so important to talk about?
Yeah, I would love to, actually. And I'd love to just address the tongue-in-cheek reference to the corporate and the mystic. My journey began in the corporate world many years ago. I think, I can see Gabby, who is on here with us. Gabby was with me back in those days when we were both working in the international sales office of the Region Hotel Group. And that was my introduction to the corporate world. So yes, hi, Gabby. So good to see you here, beautiful woman. So that, my background is very much corporate. It's very much entrepreneurial. I've, set up 4 businesses, 3 of my own, one for a couple of shareholders. So I've had that experience in the corporate world, and I have also had the experience of burnout through coming through that without the information and the wisdom that I have now. And that's largely what we want to share today, especially the paradigm of either or, because truthfully, we're not either or. And the either or paradigm can be the thing that is unconsciously contributing to that burnout to begin with. So being in the energy of, I have to be corporate or I have to be a mystic. And we're not saying in any way that those titles need to, you don't need to gravitate to those titles. You can call them whatever you want. But for me, finding the the balance of both have been what has supported me in my burnout journey, knowing that it's not an either or. I can be both and. Yeah, and that's the conversation we want to share over the coming weeks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jen. I think the other thing for me listening to you talk about this, and this is just going to be a conversation thing today, there's so much shame around burnout, and it's really only recently, if you're on my mailing list, you would have received a video in the last few days about, you know, me telling my story of burnout. But it's only recently, 3 or 4 years post burnout, that I've actually really been able to understand the experience fully, but more so been willing to talk about it. Because what I want to help us with today is reconceive our experience of burnout away from how I felt in the beginning, that it was like a failure and it was like a breakage or a breakdown, if you want, through moving away from that and through discussion towards understanding that that moment was the moment that I finally learned to listen to my body, to observe my limits, to start treating myself with nourishing kindness and gentleness, to make better choices in my career, and to live a better and more aligned life. So as we move through the series, you'll see how grateful I think both Jen and I both are for our burnout experiences, and how we want to remove the shame through discussion, probably for both of us, but for all of you, around this, you know, this experience of burnout. So that's why it's important to us.
And I just want to welcome some of the people. I can just see some of the people dropping in. We've got people from all around, not only all around Australia, we've got people dropping in from all around the world. I can see a beautiful woman from Canada dropping in. So I just personally want to, from Spokane, Washington as well, Tammy, of course. Yeah, amazing. So beautiful to see this global audience of women. I think we've only got women. What men are welcome to, believe me. Men are not excluded from this burnout process. They perhaps would identify with it slightly differently. But just want to welcome you all, and maybe just pop in the chat a B if you have experienced burnout, or feel like you might have, or have been with someone, been around someone who has experienced it. Just go ahead and just pop a B in the chat, and let's just see, you know, yeah, look at the B. Yeah, not a surprise to see the Bs popping up. Yeah, so welcome. We're all here to have this interactive conversation together. So on that, please go ahead and pop your questions in the chat, and we're going to address them at the end, aren't we?
We'll come back rather than we'll come back and address them. So if you've got a question, just pop it in there, and we're not ignoring you. We'll come back to it and address that.
Yeah, there's a Q&A box along the bottom of your screen. So if you can see the Q&A box there, use that if you feel to, or just pop it in the chat. We'll monitor the chat, but either way, we'll come back to it.
Yep, awesome. All right, so let's move on to our first, you know, content topic. And Jen, let's talk about how to identify that you might be approaching or in or having some level of experience of burnout. Where would you like to begin with that, Jen?
Well, I think what I'd like to share is there is no one size fits all with burnout. And the more I have this conversation with different people, the more I become aware that maybe it's stages, or maybe it's just different for everyone. In either case, it's, you know, it's perfect. But often what happens is we sometimes think that burnout is because you're doing too much, you know, your plate is overloaded. And that's perhaps the most common form of burnout. However, what I've come to understand through my own experiences is the symptoms, or the symptomology of burnout, can also come up when we're in avoidance or shutdown, or you know, if you wake up every day and you really just you're not excited to get out of bed or go and do what you do. That could also be a symptom of burnout. Things like isolating yourself. You might end your work week and then that's it. You can't even be on social media because it might be too triggering for you. There's many facets to burnout, and what can be, as I just said, the symptomology of burnout. If you've been following some of my posts, the thing for me about burnout is the end game. It is not how it starts. It is not it is the end game. It's not how it begins. It is very much the end game. Yeah. Ange?
Yeah. So around recognizing burnout, what I want to offer you guys, and you can Google this. If you haven't Googled it yet, I recommend after this call you do it. It's the World Health Organization definition of burnout, because when I was going through it, I'm like, is this really a thing? And it turns out it is. So basically, I'll give you a summary of what they say. There's 3 defining factors of the way the World Health Organization defines burnout, and they define it as a workplace phenomenon. So it's not generalized depression or malaise. It's not generalized anxiety. It's what happens to you when you've been applying yourself in a misaligned way. And the World Health Organization define it as a workplace thing. Okay. But I think, as I go through this, you might identify with other areas of your life. So the first element is that you're exhausted to the point of depletion. Not just a bit tired, not a bit fatigued, not just having a sleep in like I did this morning, just having a nap after lunch. You're tired to the bone. I remember, and I'll give you, I'll tell my story of burnout soon, but this depletion for me felt like a lactic acid burn, a bit like climbing the mountain yesterday, Jen, but all day, every day. Right? You wake up that way. I went to bed that way, and just fatigued, exhausted in my mind, exhausted in my body. Right? So that's the first element of the WHO definition. The second one is that you're not productive, even if you want to be. You just find your productivity, the way you apply yourself to tasks, your focus and concentration, just ain't what it used to be, right? No matter how much you love your job, love your organization, your colleagues, your work at large, you're just not as productive as you used to be. And it's like the CPU, the central processing unit, our brain, it's just not working at the same speed. Some of the algorithms seem to be like stressed and fractured and broken, right? So we're not as productive. And what that felt like for me is, when I was burning out, I was still working with clients because I didn't realize I was burning out. And what it felt like for me is, whereas I would normally go home at night and process some admin and take care of, the world of business on the laptop, I didn't even want to open the laptop. And I wasn't thinking clearly about how I engaged with what was coming through in my world of work, administratively, particularly. All of my presence, all of my clarity, all of my energy was going to showing up for clients, and there was nothing left for me, and nothing certainly left for the administration of business. So I wasn't as productive as I certainly would have liked to have been. And then the third element in the World Health Organization definition is a decline in your care for your job. And well, if you know me, I'm just going to say it straight. It's like you're out of fucks to give, basically. Your ability to care about your work, about sometimes how you're showing up in your work, about the mission of your team or your organization. Like, you sort of logically might know it's important, but you can't find anything left in your tank, in your heart, in your soul to care. You got nothing left. It's not because you don't want to, it's because the tank is empty. right?
I love it, Ange. I just love it so
They're the
much.
three things. So you're depleted to exhaustion, you're not productive, and you're out of fucks to give. You can put that down if you want, team.
And let's just keep it real. I because we're going into a few weeks of this conversation, I would really like to set the precedence going forward. We've said it in the marketing of this conversation. We are going to keep this very real. It may be very raw, but what we don't want to do is sugarcoat what this is and give you the sugar-coated fix, because it just doesn't bloody well work. It just doesn't. In fact, the sugar-coated fix is going to make you feel more of a failure because you can't do it. And why can't you do it? Because it's the way out of this process goes so much deeper than the burnout itself. There are many, many layers to this. And the only way to come through this is to be able to be real, raw, and ridiculously honest with ourselves about this as women in business, as entrepreneurs, as mums. I had a conversation on LinkedIn with someone about the word leadership. Man, if you're a mum, you're a leader. You are a leader of your family unit. Leadership, if you're on the front line of anything, you're a leader. Leadership isn't this ivory tower space to me. It is, man, look, if you've got a heart beating in your chest, you're a leader of your life. And in some way you are inspiring or teaching those around you how to be as well. So this really, I love that we've gone straight into the realness of this, Ange. Yeah.
Well, just on that note, as I shared with you on the mountain yesterday, I just really want to honor, I can't say this strongly enough, the people who are here and who might be close to or in burnout. And when I made my video the other week and posted it out this week, one of my clients, and I posted about this on LinkedIn, called me on it. He's like, Angela, I think you sugarcoated it. I'm like, all right, yeah, tell me, let's hear it. And he's like, you didn't say how fucking bad it was. And I'm like, all right, tell me more. He said, I had a coaching call with him just this week, and his words, and I just really want to honor the seriousness of this, were, I want this to be over. And he said, at the time I was burning out, he wanted it to be over. And he meant that in every sense of the word. And he said that if he could have come up with a plan that would have easily achieved that outcome without stuffing it up, he would have done it. But he was too tired. He had nothing left to make it be over.
Yeah.
Right. And, Jen and I were talking yesterday, we can have a chuckle about burnout now, but for the people who are in it or close to it, and we both said yesterday, we absolutely connect with that experience, that you're so depleted, you just need it to stop. And if you're there, hopefully this conversation and what we're about to share, we're just about to share our stories, our own stories of burnout. We might just take 10 minutes each to do that, Jen, just to give
you going to really condense it down, just so we have time for questions.
Yeah, so we're going to tell our stories of burnout and the first steps that we took. But both Jen and I yesterday admitted, it's natural to explore all options for making burnout be over. Some are better than others. So let's hear it, Jen. What was it like for you? Tell us your burnout story.
Yeah, amazing. I wanted, the phrases, just to add on to what you've just said, Ange, the phrases that were going through my head. And I want to also say, like your client so, vulnerably and beautifully shared. And can I just point out that was a dude, right? This isn't just exclusive to women. It really is I think it's a humanity thing, to be honest. But just things that would go through my head would be things like, what's the point of this again? Why am I doing this again? Remind me, why am I getting up to face this again? What's the point? They're the kinds of phrases that, began for me, really being prevalent in my thinking process on a day-to-day basis. I would hear that thought, and if you can relate to that, pop a Y or a 1, doesn't matter. Pop something in the chat, a thumbs up, a yes, or whatever.
Why am I bothering?
Why am I doing this again? Why am I getting up every day to do this again? If you can relate to that, yeah, just pop something in the chat and let us know that you can. And it's okay if you can't too. But my burnout story, my end game, thank you for those that have been so beautifully present and honest in being here. Thank you for those comments. So my end game, and I do call it my end game story, burnout story. And the reason I call it an end game is because of what Ange and I are going to be sharing with you over the coming weeks, the depth and the layers of where this is. You know, this isn't just, oh, I'm burnt out, tell me what to do. If you've been following my stuff, you'll see my favorite phrase is, we cannot do our way out of burnout, because it was the doing that got us into that in the first place. You know, it doesn't work that way. And the irony is not lost on me that there are so many people, and this is not a judgment, this is an observation on my part, but there are so many methodologies for getting out of burnout, and they're all doing. And in my experience, that just made me feel like more of a failure, because I couldn't do the things that I was being told to do to get out of burnout. So I want to kind of just make sure that that piece comes into the conversation. So my end game of burnout was in 2017, and I had literally done what I did every year, set my goals for the year, and every year somehow that list just got bigger and bigger and bigger until I created this beast that became my end game of burnout. And on that list, I had things like the 4 key things, and there were a lot of micro goals in there as well, but the 4 macro goals. I was going to successfully launch a business for a couple of shareholders, from a business plan into a building that had never even been built yet. The building that this business was going in wasn't even built. And I had decided, yeah, I'm going to make this business fully profitable within 6 months. In that same year, I decided that I was going to also complete my MBA, my Master's in Business Admin, and do that inside of 12 months, which meant 12 back-to-back subjects every month. Finish one, straight into the other, finish one, straight into the other. Yeah, sure, I can do that. Let's pop that on the list. Then I decided I love an adventure. Let me put an adventure goal in there as well. So I trekked to Everest Base Camp. And then I decided, well, wait, let me capitalize on all this training I'm doing for base camp. This is where, I don't know if you can relate to this thinking. You know, I do chuckle now, but this was my thinking. How can I, it's like the multitasking of your goals. How can I multitask a goal? Let's not have it be one goal. Let's multitask it into several goals. So when I decided to do Everest Base Camp as well, I thought, okay, well, I'll also do a 100-kilometer trail ultra marathon. Yes, 100-kilometer race. Sure, why not? And at the end of 2017, as I systematically ticked everything off that list and all the micro goals that were part of that process, I came back from my grad ceremony, for my MBA, which was in Adelaide, came back, and lo and behold, I fell apart with this mystery illness. Now, I also chuckle at that because it really wasn't a mystery illness. It was my end game of burnout, of just keeping everything together. So I spent 10 days in a horizontal position. I spent a night in hospital. They thought I had viral meningitis. And it was during those 10 days, I did some very deep, honest, difficult questioning and self-inquiry, and got to the root cause of exactly what it was that had created that version of me in the first instance, that felt that that's what she needed to do to be acceptably successful in life. Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. And I wanted to add in there too, Ange, just because I think it's important, and this came through some beautiful people that had chatted in your LinkedIn chat, was that during all of this, I was a solo mum of 2 children, you know, and a good 4 or 5 years of my life prior to that, I had been, you know, financially, physically, mentally, emotionally, a solo mom of 2 kids. So I want to, you know, really get that this is a thing for so many of us in so many capacities in our life. And I'm not saying that looking for any kind of justification. I'm not justifying anything. I'm just simply wanting to create some resonance that, you know, this happens on all different levels. You know, it happens at the level of corporate, it happens at the level of family. Everything's impacted. Everything is impacted by this. So that's my story.
Jen, just so nobody's confused, it didn't take you 10 days in bed to get over burnout, did it?
It absolutely no. Let me just thank you for catching that, beautiful woman. No, the 10 days is where I had my rock bottom, I guess. You know, if we want to use that as a term here, which would be, in my opinion, very relevant. I had my rock bottom where I had no choice but to be with myself. That's always 2 words for me now. My SELF, myself, and do that deep exploration and inquiry. And we will talk about more of that process in the coming episodes. But it's critical. It's really critical.
So after the 10 days in bed, Jen, just let's say our audience may have already done that and they're still in burnout. What were the first steps that you took to get yourself out?
The first steps that I took was to, this is going to sound so ridiculously simple, but it is, and it's also the most powerful thing that we can do, because the reason I was in burnout, the reason that I had done all of those crazy things, and, you know, prior to 2017 done even other crazier things, the reason that I had done that was because I was so disconnected from the truth of who I am and the truth of who I'm here to be at an identity level, at that foundational level. I was so disconnected from that part of me. I was being guided and directed by the extrinsic world and not the intrinsic me. So I was being everything the world and society and my parents and my community and my conditioning had told me to be. And I was never operating from the truth of who I am. And so my first steps was to become more connected to me. And what do I truly, deeply desire? You know, and
having the courage to hear that and honor it, I think.
Yeah, and so it began just simply for me, you know, and this is what I would invite anyone on the call to do. It doesn't have to be a long process, but spend even every day 5 minutes with yourself. What does that look like? Well, for me, I would just sit up in bed and close my eyes and just tune in to that deep inner part of me. And initially, I didn't get there. All I heard was this, but I would give it 5 minutes every day. Eventually, this quietened down, and I began to hear what this deep part of me really desired. And in the beginning, all she desired was rest, water, sunshine, you know, really basic things. But it was those basic things that I was denying her because I couldn't hear her. I was the noise of the outside world is so loud that most of us don't hear that part of ourselves.
And so Jen, just a quick question. After that period of rest and reflection, did you go back and try and recharged? Did you go back and try and repeat all of the patterns that got you?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am, I did. Yes, ma'am, I did. And it is a process. And the beautiful thing is that I caught myself, you know, yes, absolutely, got caught back into the cycle of it. And then I started to recognize, you know, so it's this, if you think of a spiral that takes you down, the way out of burnout is a spiral that will bring you back up. And just like a slinky or a spiral, you may find that you might, you know, go slide slightly back a little bit, you know, but you'll get to recognize what your things are that are going to put you back into that cycle. And there's no silver bullet here. It's really important that we all understand. And if someone's promising you some kind of silver bullet to get out of burnout, I'm going to just tell you that you probably will just find that you're going to be in burnout for even longer. There isn't a silver bullet. And we will go far, you know, really deeply into this over the coming weeks. This is identity level stuff. Like, it really is. And when you know yourself at that level, you are so powerful in your yeses and your nos. And that in itself is an extraordinary doorway through the darkness that is burnout. Yeah.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So I might make the transition between your story and mine, just commenting on my deep resonance with, like, what I heard in your story was part of your identity. A big part of your identity was defining yourself by how much you could do and achieve and fit in and tick off, and success and goals and do. And the more I can do, the more successful I can be. But anyone who's stuck in that cycle, and let us know in the chat if this is resonating with you, anyone who's stuck in that cycle of doing, it must have occurred to you by now, as it did to us, that there's no satisfaction, contentment, peace, joy to be found in that constant cycle of doing, because it's never enough, right? And just like offer a comment if this is resonating with you. The more you try to fit in, so you think, I'll just get to the bottom of my email inbox, or I'll just get through my task list, or I'll just get through my MBA, or climb Mount Everest, or run 100 kilometers.
Yeah. Darling, let me just add to that. Yes.
Yeah.
While I was laying in those in horizontally for 10 days, the piece I didn't share, which I think, thank you for what you've just shared. It's just reminded me to share it with you all. I lay there in the most, and again, not sugarcoating it, I lay there in those 10 days and the hospital night as well, depressed, empty, like I had this hole in the middle of me. I was underwhelmed, I was depleted, I was sad. And the thing that I couldn't understand in allowing those feelings in, I had no choice, I was on my back. But what I couldn't understand was that how could I be feeling all of that when on paper I had literally just had one of the most successful years of my life? How, you know, that was the entry point for me. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't stack up.
Yep.
Yeah. So thank you for referencing that. It was very, very key.
Yeah.
Doing wasn't the thing, you know.
Yeah. And again, just as I transition to my own story, what comes up for you in that stillness when burnout requires you to stop? I say requires you don't have a choice, as I'm about to tell you, but as you heard from Jen. Right. When it requires you to stop, expect all of the shit that you've been avoiding in your life, the stuff you didn't want to feel, think about, acknowledge, hear, process, connect with, expect that to arrive on your doorstep.
Coming up.
It's a good time, right? And so my story, I got divorced, and I realized, this was in 2017, and I realized, holy crackers, no one is coming to save me. I need to be financially independent. And I just started my business, having been fired from a misaligned role that just wasn't a fit for, never been fired in my life. And so I'd started my business and got divorced. It was big time. And that might indicate how unresourcefully, how dysfunctionally I was living up until that point. And so I thought, I better make a go of this. And so I hired me a mentor who taught me how to do business and sell. And that was so much fun. And I became so good at it, I sold all of my time. I would leave my house in Harvey Bay, beautiful beachfront little cottage I had, and my pets in Harvey Bay on a Monday, and drive to wherever or fly to wherever, and then come back Friday night and reintroduce myself to my pets and take the handover from the house sitter or the pet sitter or the whatever. And I would use the weekend to recover and maybe do some laundry and just sleep it off, sleep my week off, so I could get up on the Monday and do it all again. And believe me, if I had more time to sell, I would have sold it, right? Because when you start a business, you want to be successful, you want to make money, it's all on you, you're feeling the responsibility of it. And for me, I'm like, well, that's about as successful as I can be. And this wasn't just money motivated. That's where I've gone so far. But the other part of me, and some of my clients are on this call or new clients starting to work with me, is like, I'm really a giver. Like, I really care about my clients, and every person I sit with, I want the best outcome, and I would pour myself into this. So I wasn't just going away to work for a week and have an easy time. Like, I'm giving it everything, right? Giving my work everything. And I had a conversation with my mentor in about April of 2000. I can't remember if it was 18 or 19. It might have been 18. It's April. I'm in the car park out at Charters Towers. No, not Charters Towers. Chinchilla. I'm in the car park. I'm like, Das, I'm feeling really fatigued. I can't sell anymore. I've got no more time left, and I could really use a break. And I'm not sure how I'm going to keep going to fulfill all of these commitments I've made. Stupid, completely stupid behavior. He's like, Ange, take a break. I'm like, Das, I can't. I've made all of these commitments that I must now follow through on. Anyway, April, May, June, July, I moved from Harvey Bay to Brisbane, and I'm sitting outside Coles, my new local shopping centre, with a trolley full of groceries. And I sit down on a bench, and I just realised, I can still remember, I'm remembering reconnecting with that moment viscerally. I just realised I had nothing left. And I sat there for about an hour. My cold things were getting hot in the trolley. Sat there for about an hour. I'm like, I have nothing left. And I rang Darcy again, my mentor. Thank God for that man. And I'm like, I can't work this week. I said, Darcy, I've got a problem. He's like, what's up, Ange? This is an unscheduled call. And I'm like, I can't work this week, and I don't even think I can get home from Coles. Like, for me to push the trolley to the car and get in the car and drive home, it feels out of my realm at the moment. My tank is so empty, I've got nothing left for this. And his words, I still remember them precisely. He's like, Ange, welcome to burnout. We said that this would happen, and here you are. Welcome. I'm like, oh, okay, now what? He's like, and he talked me through it. He's like, you're going to get in the car, drive home, unpack your groceries, and go to bed for 2 weeks. I'm like, can't do it. He's like, well, what are your options? Okay. At the time, I had a sore back, and I wasn't ready to acknowledge I was in burnout. I was too embarrassed to say it. And so I told my clients, I've got a really sore back, and I do have like a disc bulge. It's legitimate. And in my mind, that was sort of a big part of the reason I was taking the time off. So what did I do? I slept for 2 weeks, a bit like Jen, and I cancelled that work. And then, I tried to eat a salad or a vegetable and drink a bit more water. And I walked outside in the sunshine, not to exercise because I didn't have that in me. I just had to be outside and sort of connecting with nature and the world. And then I tried to go back to working the way that I had been, because I'm like, okay, I've had my rest, I've had my long weekend, I've had my holiday, let's get back to it. And it was a devastating moment when I again realized I'm still depleted, I'm not productive, and many things that I should care about, I didn't care. I'm still in it. Bloody hell, I'm still in this burnout. Now, to give you the punchline, burnout for me, even though it's over, I can still I still viscerally manage the remnants of that in my body. I know when I'm approaching my limits and I don't want to go anywhere near them. I slept in this morning. There's a good chance I'll have a nap later in the afternoon, right? Yeah, Gen 2. What I discovered is I just couldn't return to that level of functioning. And so what did I do beyond the 2 weeks and the sleep and the try to eat a vegetable and get some water on board? I sat in stillness. I had my mentor. I engaged a new mentor pretty quick because I'd been watching him talk about burnout for about 6 months. And so he was already in my orbit. And I'm like, okay, now is the time. I've got to start to work with Andrew. Yes, so I can get data. Good question. We'll get to that. So I work for myself, so I could manage my schedule to create this kind of time. So my mentor taught me how to sit in stillness. He taught me how to feel. It's the weirdest thing to say. I don't know about you guys, but in my childhood, in my family, in my primary, secondary school education, in my university education, and definitely in my business education, they taught me how to be productive, successful, set goals, do, run, how to avoid stuff, how to dress up bad feelings with positive psychology. No one taught me how to sit and trust myself to feel what needed to be felt and come up, because all I was doing in my burnout was just running away from this stuff that I needed to work through and keeping myself busy, justifying it with money. And that's how it happened. And so my mentor taught me how to feel things, and I'm forever grateful to him. His name was Andrew. And I engaged him. I worked with him for about a year, actually. And then the other things I did was started, to get massages and chiro, and I saw a naturopath, although I didn't implement her great recommendations because I was too overwhelmed. And what's happened over the, last few years is me bit by bit realigning my life to put it in a one sentence statement: to live in alignment. It's the only cure. No matter how little sense it makes. I think today's Thursday, and like I've said, I just had a sleep and I'll probably have a nap. That doesn't make sense in the business world. I get it, right? Had I been working for an employer, I would have had to take a different approach, right? We can get to that. But living in alignment day by day, and I'm still making these tweaks, and I certainly have days. I had a day yesterday where I was out of alignment, and everything I'm doing today is about coming back into alignment, right? Because the longer I stay out of alignment, the further I'm likely to go out of alignment, the more it leads me off track, the more energetically depleted I get, and the more my stress and anxiety rises, and I feel like I'm going to go back to burnout. Mm-hmm. So the only thing that I'm focused on these days in terms of first steps and where you get to with this is listening to my own voice, honoring that, and living in alignment. And I might just end on that so that we can address the questions. Yeah. Is there anything you want to ask or add around that, Jen?
Oh my goodness. I'm so excited that we've gotten to this conversation. The whole alignment piece for me, as I keep saying, burnout is the end game. Where does it begin? It begins when we were told that the version of us isn't acceptable, right? So really backpedal this. Let's just backpedal it, and I'll do it very quickly today, and we will explore this deeply as we go along. When I did this, if I go back to the start of my corporate career, I was told how I needed to be, how I needed to dress, how I needed to speak, what I needed to do, what I couldn't do in order to be successful. Then I took that back even further, and I went, okay, well, where did that begin? Where did I actually even start with the belief that there was a certain way to be? I went right back to when I was a little girl, and we can all identify with this. I did this to my children. right? I fully raised my children this way. I told them how to be not, when they were being too much, I would tell them to dull themselves down. That was true for me too as a child growing up. I was taught what being a good girl looked like. And we talked about this yesterday. We had our Sunday best clothes or our good clothes or our going to town clothes. And we had our round the house clothes, right? And never the twain shall meet. And this is where the burnout begins, when we right back to where we have begun not being in alignment with who we are here to be. And there is a world full of people that are being a version of themselves that isn't even who they are. And it's okay if you don't know who you are. I didn't know who I was, and for me, alignment is the key piece. I know when I'm out of alignment because my energy levels just sink. You'll know this. If you're listening to this, you will know when you're in flow, if everything's flowing in life for you, you know how easy and effortless that is. You know how aligned and how energizing that is, right? It's almost like a self-perpetuating energy source. Yeah, it is, because you are in full alignment. When you're not in alignment, you will know, because everything feels hard. If you wake up in the morning and it feels so ridiculously hard to do the task that's first on your to-do list in the day, the likelihood is in some way, space, shape or form, you're out of alignment. And there are some processes that Ange and I are both very passionate about figuring out how to live in full alignment. I will not say no to myself to make someone else's life easier ever. Because when I do, I'm out of alignment, and it doesn't affect them, it affects me.
Yes, so true, Jen. I just want to address Diana's question here.
Thank you.
Really practical, right? How does taking time off work for employees? What do you say to your boss? And what happens with it being on your medical record for income insurance as a self-employed person? So I'll answer this in a two-pronged way. So for me, I cancelled 2 weeks of client commitments. I switched a lot of every second meeting of my coaching, I switched to Zoom, and this is before COVID, before it was popular, and did stuff over the phone. And I made incremental decisions to just start to rein it back in, right? For an employee, I'm not going to tell you what to say to your boss. I'm going to ask you what feels most aligned and true for you and safe for you, because only you know your boss and your workplace. What would you tell them if you needed an extended period of time off, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 months? My client who I mentioned wanted it all to end. He's worked with me for about 8 or 9 months now, and we're finishing up in February, but he took his leave. He took some accrued sick leave. And in the end, his workplace recognised that he was not okay. And while he didn't make a workers' compensation claim, that remains an option to you. And yeah, that's a big decision to make, because there's stuff that goes with that. I'm not encouraging you towards it or away from it, but they're supportive of you taking unpaid leave, but probably not stress leave, right? Got you. Because the connotations that come with that make employers nervous, make your HR departments nervous. I was a HR manager for 25 years. If someone was on stress leave, I'm like, okay, there's a workers' compensation claim that we're going to have to likely defend, is the employer's perspective, so that our workers' compensation premiums don't get up. Now, I'm not proud of that. I did that shit for 25 years. There's no way I'm going back to be a HR manager to do that to people. What I would say is what feels safe for you, what is true for you. And if you can take unpaid leave, I would find a way to take that, even if it does offer some short-term relief, but comes with a little bit of financial stress. Do what you can to create space for yourself, instead of ignoring that message that's coming from your body that you need to stop and slow down. Like, the most important thing is for you to honor that message from your body and create space with your employer. Because the most valuable thing in that is you, for the first time, starting to honor yourself and what your body needs. Anything to add to that, Jen?
Yeah, I love that you've addressed the HR side of that, because I get that, that's that side of it.
Business, right?
And for me, burnout is not just something that affects us individually. Collectively, it is also impacting the future of humanity. And I know that might sound really dramatic and really grave, but it is that dramatic and that grave. When we have something that is endemic, like burnout, and it is affecting everyone on this ground level, the creation of something new, a new way of being, might seem radical, at first. And so, yeah, I'm with you on that, Ange, in that, Diana, definitely the first step is to find, I just say, find what feels good for you first and foremost, and, if you need support with that, definitely reach out to someone who can support you to really get clear on what feels good for you. And then start to take it might be small steps at first. How did we get to this as a society? It didn't happen overnight. It's happened over decades. In my opinion, the Industrial Revolution was the start of burnout in our modern day society that we know now. And so we need to understand that, again, there's no magic bullet, no silver bullet, but there are steps that we can take as individuals that will what's the word I'm looking for? Will contribute to a new system, a new way of doing things,
And Jen, you and I are part of that new way, right? And
we are very much part of that new way.
It's in many ways, you go, it's all right for you. You've got your own business. You set your own schedule. It's a luxury, blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you, owning your own business is the biggest personal development journey you'll ever have in your life.
Man, truth.
But choices, not just to start your own business, but choices to stay as an employee, if you want, are available to you that you have been dismissing, that would allow you to create some space for yourself to set boundaries. And I just see Gabrielle's question coming in here. How does saying no to people who ordinarily say yes to become okay when you know they'll not like it? Isn't that selfish? I love this question.
That's my beautiful friend Gabby. I love this question too, Gabby.
You're going to have a perspective on this, and I would say Jen taught me this. When you say yes to yourself, and the consequence of being out of alignment means you say no to yourself, and you know where that's going to lead, you might still make those choices, but you do it consciously. And more saying yes to myself means saying no to others isn't necessary, because I'm just not available for what they're asking me for. Jen, what have you got?
Oh my goodness, the word selfish, Gabby. I've talked already on the call today about what constituted being a good girl growing up, and how that came forward, not just from being a little kid, to think about when you went to school, you were told what it meant to be a good girl. And then when you went to university or, first job, you were told what it meant to be a good girl. And for you to choose anything other than that was selfish, and so the very word selfish has such an historic charge in it, that we believe that means a certain thing, and it means something particular about us. And we don't have a lot of time to go deep in this now, but the word selfish has created trauma responses in almost every human. And as a little stepping stone to help with you right now, I would change the word from selfish to self-full. What is going to support me to be a full vessel? Because if I'm actually trying to give from an empty vessel, what I'm giving is emptiness. So
Yes,
to
I
be
love that, Jen.
full of self means that you have an overflow. In relationships, I see this a lot in relationships where you've got two empty people wanting the other person to fill them up. And so we've just got a relationship that's trying to be constructed from two empty vessels. The way to add richness to yourself and your life and those around you and your employer, this is about, what is your employer getting from you? Is it getting something that's from a space of emptiness, or is it coming from a space of fullness? So, selfish is a big thing to unpack. However, the first part is, what have I made this mean? That's a beautiful self-inquiry question. What have I made this mean about myself? That if I say, I have a thing that a mantra that the women that work with me, I get them to put it everywhere is this: I'm not saying no to you, I'm saying yes to me.
Thanks, Jen. Yep.
That's the space from which I love to come. When I'm struggling with a no, I will go straight to that point. I'll go, okay, I'm not saying no to you, I'm actually just saying yes to me.
Thank you,
And
Jen.
if I'm saying yes to me, I'm going to be full. Yeah.
I'm just conscious of time. We've got a minute left on the call. So I want to leave our audience with these two questions. Are you in or approaching burnout? And what tiny step can you take today to nourish and be gentle and kind and nurture yourself? It might be small. It might be that 5 minutes of stillness that Jen was talking about. I would love to see that come into the chat comments, actually. What is the one most gentle, loving, kind, nourishing thing you can do for yourself today if you are approaching burnout, if you're connecting with those symptoms? Next week, same time on Thursday, we're talking about how to live alongside burnout, because it's not over in 10 days. Takes years. Hate to steal this.
And I think to add on to that, and just as something for people to understand about burnout, is the way I understand burnout now is to understand it from the perspective of addiction. My mum was an alcoholic, so I speak from a lived experience here when I say this. My mum, right up until the day she died, referred to herself as an alcoholic. It's not, even though she hadn't had a drink for 35 years. However, so I think we need to understand with burnout, it's something we do live with. It's something that becomes something that we understand about ourselves. And if we're trying to resist it or to put it in a closed door, then it's going to keep coming back harder. So it is a lived with experience, powerful. If we come from that space.
Thank you, Jen. So next week is about how to live with it, how to know your limits, viscerally feel your limits, and start to manage yourself by saying no to others, yes to self. We'll cover that more next week, and managing the expectations of yourself and others. And thank you, Bettina, for your comment. Yes, step outside. Feel free to share this recording. It's coming to you via email. So if you found it useful, then go ahead and share it to people who you know would get benefit from it as well, and invite them to join us next week. We'll be back here at 11 o'clock next Thursday. So we might end the session there. I'll say goodbye, and Jen can too in a moment. We'll stop the recording.
Yes, thank you. I would just, like you, Ange, the first step is turning up to have such a conversation. For many of us, the easy thing to say is, oh, I don't have time for this. So I want to acknowledge everybody who is catching the replay, because you're still taking time to absorb it, and who are here live with us from all around the world. I love that we've got a global audience today. And Ange, I want to thank you, because it's a beautiful thing to journey alongside a woman who who really does understand this at the level that you and I do. And it's not, you know, it may not initially seem like an easy thing to traverse, but my gosh,
possible. And what's on the other side of it?
And it's what's on the other side of it, you know, and a life that you love, a life that you actually get excited about getting up out of bed to be a part of, you know, it is completely possible, no matter where we are at this point. A step towards that is always possible. Yeah.
Thank you for your comments coming in, Alicia, Bettina. Wonderful. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.